What's the real value of account management at an agency today? If you ask Jess Manganelli, the answer is simple. It's leadership that drives results, both for the client and for the agency. Jess is the founder of Betts Betz, a consultancy that helps creative agencies to build high-performing account teams. With experience at companies like Ogilvy and Deutsch, she knows what it takes to run complex and profitable client relationships. In this episode, Jess and I explore what it really takes to thrive in account management today, from redefining the value of the role to leading from wherever you are to handling tough client conversations without damaging trust. We talk about business acumen, emotional labor, cross-functional trust, and what to do when your team is quietly burning out. Let's get into it with Jess Manganelli. If you're an account manager, you already know this. You're the one keeping the business running. You own the client relationships, drive the revenue, and solve the tough problems for your customers. But here's the challenge. Most companies don't give account managers the training or recognition they deserve. That's what you'll get here on the Account Management Secrets podcast. I'm Alex Raymond, and after working with thousands of account managers, I know what separates the best from the rest. In this show, we cover exactly what you need to succeed: handling tough client conversations, driving renewals and upsells with confidence, and proving your value every single day. There's no fluff, no outdated sales tactics, just real practical strategies you can use right now to grow your accounts and build a successful career. If that sounds like what you've been looking for, hit subscribe and let's get into it. Hey, Jess, great to see you. Thanks so much for joining me.
Sure. Hi, Alex. Nice to be here.
Yeah. We connected a little while ago. Basically, I saw something of yours on LinkedIn. I don't even remember how it popped up on my feed. It just did, but I always like to talk to people who are interested in exploring the ins and outs and ups and downs of the account management space. And specifically, the thing that caught my attention was a post of yours provocatively titled, "Is Account Management Dead?" Now, you work specifically in the creative agency space. And so we've had other folks on this podcast who also work in that space. James Hidden is one of them, where we talked about the dark arts of account management. But I was really interested about the title of this particular post of yours, and thought we would just kick off by helping us understand and kind of chew through, why is anybody having this debate? Why is there even a question mark about, is account management alive or dead? Like, what's going on in the agency world that would cause people to start to even question this?
Yes. Yeah. So I would say you found me through that LinkedIn post, and so did a lot of other people. So I definitely hit on something with that question. And it's one that I have had people ask me, that I've been thinking about. And in my role now, working with a lot of agencies as a consultant and really focused on helping people improve their account management skills, I've also run across a handful of agencies that do not have any account people, or maybe have just a couple of account people. So it kind of started rolling around in my head. Like, I was really seeing people out there doing the creative agency work, which I think traditionally an account person has felt so essential to that work, but starting to see a shift of some people going without it, and kind of questioning if that was really a trend that would continue, and kind of what that looked like.
And is it in your mind, is this a seismic shift, or is this more like a do more with less sort of discussion?
Yes, I think it's more of a do more with less. I think where I hear it most often is with very small shops, or shops that are just starting out, and they're making those first couple of hires. And really, I think that a lot of folks have experienced account management that is not focused on driving the business forward. And so I think a lot of people have a perception of account management that it's much more of a facilitation role, or that in a lot of cases, it feels like a nice to have. And so I think for me, it feels like a lot of these traits that I talk about in the post, spoiler alert, I don't think account management is dead. I think it's super important. And a lot of what I talk about and focus on in my consulting work is how to shift that perception of account management, or how to make account feel so valuable that you couldn't imagine living without it, because it is so much more than facilitation. It is so much more than having someone who's just, tends to be type A. It's really someone who's looking after your business, looking after your client's business, and is really that leader and that person who's driving collaboration forward. So my personal view is, I think it's sometimes a symptom of the life stage of an agency, but I don't think that great account people are going anywhere.
And so I know that in the creative agency world, like the account managers tend to be pretty full spectrum, right? Meaning it's a lot, right? The account manager, and they're called different things: account directors, account coordinators. You've got a lot of words for these, but it's a pretty involved role. Help us understand what does a typical account manager do in an agency context? How might that be different from other industries that you've seen?
Sure. Yes, I would say that's true. It's a big job, and it tends to be a very all-encompassing job, even at more junior levels. So a way that I was trained in account management and brought up was that as the account person, you should be the second best at every other discipline, because you need to know when to tap into those people, when to bring a problem to a different team, and you need to be able to be a really great collaborative partner to those people. So it's not enough to just know they exist. You've got to be able to deeply understand what they do, respect what they do, and be able to, be a sparring partner for them and be additive to them. So I think that alone demands a lot, right? Because that's basically someone saying, learn everything this company does and be the second best at all of it. And then you actually have your real job, which we need you to be the best at.
Right.
And so it is a lot. And on top of that, I would say, to me, the thing I always talk about with people is the focus of an account person in a creative agency, as you go up the ranks, what you're focused on and where your vision needs to be will, of course, shift. But to me, the thing that I find true at all levels is this intense focus on problem solving and being able to lead from where you are. So even if you're in more junior roles, being able to lead a team through solving a problem. And I think that there's a lot of value in that when it's done well.
It's pretty much a get shit done kind of role.
It is. And then but it's interesting because I think in the early years, there's such a focus on get shit done. And then, 2 promotions later, everyone needs you to be the most strategic, business-oriented leader. And a lot of people have trouble making that jump. So I always tell people, even at junior levels, like, yes, I want you to get shit done, but I want you to do it in really strategic ways, because otherwise it gets really hard to shift that later on. So it's getting shit done, but it's also knowing what to get done at the right moment to serve this end goal.
One of the things that has been a recurring theme on this podcast is the fact that a lot of account managers need to increase their business acumen. They just need to get smarter about the mechanics of how companies work, metrics, financials, strategy, and stuff like that. And really, we need account managers to do this to be a better service to their clients, to really deeply understand, what their clients' goals are, what levers they can pull, how the business overall works. And I've got this idea that like, if you don't do that, you're not being a great account manager. If you don't also invest in yourself and your skills. I'm not saying that everyone needs to go out and get an MBA. That's not the point. But you still need to have enough of a command of business out there, like, in order to be credible, right? Because another thing that account managers do is we're typically talking to fairly senior people at the client organization. And if we don't have that coverage on how their business makes money or loses money and like how all that stuff works, we're simply not a peer. We're not an effective peer for them. And they're not going to take our advice, and we're not going to be able to guide them as well. So how do you think about that?
I agree with you 100% on that. And I think that this is a key piece that holds a lot of account people back from reaching their full potential and from having their accounts reach their full potential. And I think you're right, especially in the creative agency world. A lot of people come into that world because they don't want to go get an MBA. They don't love an Excel spreadsheet. They are drawn to this world because it feels more creative. It feels looser in some ways. And I actually think that can be a little bit of a trap because while that's true, there has to be this rigor underneath it to really succeed in a way that I think anyone walking into a job at Goldman Sachs knows there's going to be rigor, knows that they're going to need to have a strong business acumen. And you still need that in a creative agency setting, but it can be easy to convince yourself you don't. And the thing I would say to anyone who's listening to that and who is maybe feeling a little intimidated or feeling a little bit like, ooh, I'm not sure I'm there where I need to be is I think strip out any jargon that is preventing you from asking questions. You know, you don't have to know all of the different terms and all of the acronyms off the bat. The thing that you need to really understand is how is the client making money? What is important to them to keep making money? What are their business goals? How are they translating that to their marketing goals? What are my clients worried about? You can have all of those initial conversations without hitting an acronym. And I think that if you need to do that to get yourself comfortable and to start learning, but it's just a muscle you need to be flexing. I do see people who've gone pretty deep into their careers without flexing that muscle. And then it can be kind of paralyzing because you feel like you're going to be found out that you don't know these things. So even just in the beginning, taking it to a more human level, I'd rather people be having that conversation at a human level than not having it at all. And then, work up to really full mastery of, how people are talking about it and how they're communicating it and reading quarterly reports and everything like that. But don't let not having that strong, solid business foundation hold you back from even going there.
And I mean, to add on to that, you're not going to get promoted if you don't know how this stuff works. Because a lot of people will wind up being in charge of a larger book of business or taking over a strategic account or running the entire team. And you're not going to get those opportunities if you don't have facility with numbers, if you can't figure out how the business works. And so I think that's a really critical point too, just when people are thinking about career growth, right?
For sure. And I think it's tough because as an account person, especially in a creative agency, it does demand a lot of you. You've got to be able to have those business focused conversations. You've got to be able to talk about revenue. You've got to be able to talk about KPIs and OKRs and all of those things. And at the same time, you've really got to be a great creative mind and you've got to have excellent taste in what the work we're producing is. And so it forces you to flex a lot of muscles. And yes, all of those things become critical as you're trying to move up the ranks. And so the more that you can start to build all of those habits into the way you do the job from early on, the easier time you'll have kind of picking up harder skills or picking up new things and kind of adding them to your arsenal as you grow.
And so with that in mind, what are the other traits of a great account manager specifically in the agency world, but I suspect this actually applies all over the place?
Yeah. Well, I would say, just sticking on the business side of things, the really also understanding how the agency makes money and how the agency's business functions. And it is shocking to me, the number of agencies that I encounter who are not fully having those kinds of conversations with their account folks and who are not fully charging their account teams with deeply understanding how the agency is making money and having them look after it. And so I think that that's a critical thing. If you're in an agency where that is not something that everyone's talking about, I would be asking about that and having that understanding so that you can look after your team and how you are contributing to that growth and to the health of the agency. So I always tell people, and this was one of the slides in my post, is you're really the builder of business is. You need to be thinking always about your client's business as well as your own agency's business. So I would say staying really kind of tuned into both of those.
Right. I mean, that's a tough line for a lot of people because,
Yeah.
we're told to go and be the advocate for our clients, the evangelist for our clients. And, you want to avoid Stockholm syndrome where you over identify with the client's needs and forget about your own. Because remember, at the end of the day, it's your company who's paying your salary, making money, getting stuff done, and so on. And so you need to, remember that. Now, in your role as client advocate, yes, you need to be the mouthpiece for your customers, make sure that their needs are well understood within your organization. But remember whose side you're on at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And I think that taking care of the internal team is actually the best way to take care of your client. Because if you are not tuned into the way your agency makes money, the health of your agency, let's face it, you are going to be asked to deliver more with less. There's going to be a round of layoffs. Something will happen. They'll pull your team onto a pitch. You won't have the actual resources to do what you need to do. And even beyond that, if you have all of those things, but if your team culture internally is just everyone feels like they're just taking orders from the clients through the account people, or their processes are just not set up and everyone is kind of continually pulling their hair out, that is not a team that does great work for their clients. And so, yes, it is absolutely your job as an account person to advocate for the client to the agency, but it's equally your job to advocate for your team to the client and be really clear on what you need and what your team needs to get the best work done. And I think a lot of people are deferential to the point that it is, it's a problem for them and for the clients. And the clients don't come to us for us to say yes at every turn. They come to us to be partners to help them achieve their business goals. And so it's our job to also voice what our needs are when those happen, not just pretend that they don't exist.
This is really worth double clicking on here. So a lot of people, account managers, they're like, I'm a people person and I like to solve problems. And so we sometimes do get this sense that, we kind of internalize this like customer's always right type of philosophy. And that can go too far. Remember, your customers hired you. They bought your product, bought your service, bought your solution, hired you to solve a problem. And because they think you have expertise and experience that it's going to help them get there faster. It does not mean that you're supposed to say yes to every single request. You're not supposed to bend over backwards. You're not supposed to say how high when they say jump. You're there to help them meet their goals. And you need to sometimes put guardrails around their requests, put it in a box, and help to shape that. Really, I think one of the things here is leadership that gets under discussed for account managers, right? Is you need to lead the client to where they want to go. You need to be in the driver's seat of the car, not the passenger seat of the car, right? In terms of that relationship. How do you react to that?
100%. And I also think, to me, when you say, account folks being in the leadership position, I don't see that just as account directors being in the leadership position. I feel that in an account role, no matter how junior or senior you are, you need to be comfortable leading and you need to lead from where you are in that moment. And I think a lot of times, junior folks I'm always so interested in the teams that I'm working on or working with, how the more junior people are experiencing things, because oftentimes they're seeing things that the more senior folks are not having visibility into. So I think having those conversations across levels, across teams, and having everyone be attuned to the fact that they are leaders and they are advocating for, as I said, advocating for the clients internally and advocating for the internal team to the clients. And that is the most valuable part of an account role. When going back to, is account management dead? That is when you take great account people out of the equation, that is so much of what you're missing, is that leadership between both teams and that knitting together of having the client team and the agency team feel as though they're solving problems together and not, trying to convince one another of what the next right thing to do is, but that we're using kind of everyone's perspectives, everyone's experience, everyone's ideas to collectively move this ball forward. And having someone who is charged with being the leader of that relationship, of that group, of answering that challenge is really critical. And having that person feel empowered to have hard conversations with clients. It's really tough. Sometimes agency cultures are incredibly, say yes, say yes, say yes to whatever the client wants. And I like to challenge people on, more often than not, it should be yes and. And there are also times it should be no. But it should rarely just be a yes. Even if the yes and is explaining what the implication is or helping the client understand how that's going to impact the internal team, goes a long way. And also clients are hungry for that. Clients want that. Clients are people too, and I've had very few clients in my career that are, happy to hear that the internal team is frustrated. Having those conversations sometimes where feedback hits, the team is unhappy with it, they're feeling frustrated, they're feeling burned out. Picking up the phone as an account person and calling the client and saying, "Hey, I got to tell you, it's kind of landing hard over here. Like we're frustrated with this. We want to work through it. Can we have a conversation about this?" And just being open to that and kind of not papering over that because you want to make the client feel better, because it doesn't actually do that in the long run is the thing.
So this is a very interesting topic, and I can imagine a lot of people sitting there being like, okay, I hear Jess, I hear what she's saying, yeah, I should have difficult conversations with my clients, and then freezing when the moment presents itself. So let's talk about this a little bit. When I've got a difficult client who's making unreasonable requests, or I want to redirect them, or we're potentially at risk of losing money on an account if we do too much free work, or there's all these things that come up for people, or morale is down, or the customer snaps at us. There's a lot of things that can go wrong. Lots of areas for potential tension. What's your advice to the account manager on bringing this up? Like, how do we? So literally, break down for us. How do we start the conversation? How do we progress it? How do we get to some sort of closure with the client when we know there's something gnawing at us that we need to say to them, but we need to stay professional. We need to stay above board. We want to not get fired by the client. We don't want the client to hang up and then call our boss or our CEO, for example, either. So walk us through having a difficult conversation with a customer.
Sure. I would say there are 3 things that I always, root conversations in and really root all of working with a client in. And the first one is grounding everything in what their strategic objectives are. What are the strategic objectives? Why are we even doing this work? What ball are we moving forward? Similar along those lines, what is the most valuable thing to us right now? What could be the most valuable outcome in front of us? So those are both very rooted in the business and in the work. So in order to have an effective conversation, you've got to be rooted in the business and rooted in the work. It's very hard to go into a tough conversation with the client if you don't know all of that inside and out, right? So you've got to be buttoned up there. And then the other thing is I tell people we're all just peopling. Like at the end of the day, you've got to take a little bit of that shine off of the relationship. I think a lot of times it can feel like there's this power imbalance of, the client is up here and we're the agency and we have to serve them and we have to do what they say. And I want you to kind of shift that back to an equal playing field where you guys are partners. And that's a person on the other end of the line. You're a person, you're 2 people working together to find a solution. So those are kind of the things that help me recenter and get ready for a tough conversation. And I also think that that helps it feel like a more strategic conversation, like a more relationship-oriented conversation, and it can keep you out of the the weeds, where a lot of times the frustration is coming from the weeds. It's coming because you're on the 6th round of creative dev and they're nitpicking the copy and they gave some feedback that's totally contradictory to what they gave 2 rounds ago. And everyone internally is going to be waving that banner like they're contradicting themselves. It's very tempting to go into a call and be like, you guys are changing your mind. You're making us crazy. We're doing this again. We were only scoped for 2 rounds. Try to go into it as like, hey, I'm noticing that there's been some inconsistencies in the feedback. Like, can you help me understand what's going on there? And that you're not coming at accusing them. You're coming at that trying to understand it. And so who knows what kind of answer you might get, right? If you go in just being like, you guys are making us change things that you had us change before, you're going to get defense from them because that's the natural human reaction. If you go in saying, I'm noticing this, I'm not sure why we're ending up here. Can you help me understand that? You might find out there's a new stakeholder. There's someone on their side who's not on board and is kind of maybe driving your client crazy. There might be changes happening in product. There might be new research that they've got a sneak peek on that you haven't seen yet. Who knows what the reality is? But most of the time, there is something larger. And if you invite the client to bring you into that, then you can start to position yourself as a partner to help them solve that and help you, help me help you kind of vibe of like, right. Okay, Bill in product is not loving this. What do we need to do? Did Bill see the brief? Should we get on a call with Bill and take him through that? What does he need to do to feel heard? All of a sudden, you're actually getting to solutions instead of the client defending themselves, you defending yourself, and kind of ending up, that's the kind of conversation that doesn't feel good. And when you can go into it with curiosity, giving people the benefit of the doubt, staying rooted in those objectives, and just at the end of the day, remembering that we're all just people trying to do our best. That has the power to grow your relationships, right? That's where you start to unlock things. That's where you deepen trust. That's where your client hangs up the phone and is like, okay, like they wanted to learn more. They want to be a partner in this solution. So it's actually kind of a gift. It doesn't feel like that in the moment, but you can turn that into such an opportunity.
So I want to highlight a couple of the things that I heard there to make sure that everyone really, really gets this. The first is, you open with, I'm noticing. So you're bringing something to the table, and I would further indicate in this situation, you want to be noticing things that are actual truth. This is not your feelings about what happens. This is not your interpretation about what happens. It's literally something a camera would have recorded, right? I noticed that we're on, iteration number 6 of this. Therefore, whatever. I noticed that we are 3 weeks overdue with whatever we're working on, et cetera. Like very, very, you want to be specific, and you want it to be inarguable, right? So you open with a simple statement of fact. Now, entirely possible that your client is not aware. They're not waking up thinking about this. They haven't realized that they're on iteration number 6. They thought they were on number 4. They didn't realize that your team was doing 90-hour weeks to complete this last week or whatever, right? So simply stating that fact, but you want it to be something that no one's going to argue about. You don't want to start with an opinion or a point of view or an interpretation or a guess about anyone's motivation or where we are, because then all we wind up doing is arguing about the facts.
Yes.
So you're saying, I'm noticing that this is happening, and this has just got to be super concrete. And then you said, can you help me understand? Which is another way of saying, I'm curious about. And what this does is this broadens the aperture of the conversation to say, hey, you probably have things going on that I don't know about. Let's talk about that. Let's see what's behind the scenes here. And you can further make the case by saying, I'm noticing this is happening. Here's the impact. And so you were saying before, ground this in the customer's strategic goals. Often the customer, they've got a million things going on too. Like you're just one tiny segment of their day and week, right? Like it's a big deal to us because maybe it's a big customer, but for them, we could be, a couple of hours a week, if that, on their minds. And so we then want to then say, here's the impact. I'm noticing this is happening. Here's the impact. We're going to be late. We're going to be over budget. You're not going to get the results you want. My team is working very hard. Whatever the thing is, help them see the impact. And then I'm curious about what's going on. I'm curious about how we could support you better. I'm curious about, how do you see things? And it's that curiosity and help me understand that then allows the conversation to flow. Because for the most part, these are simply communication issues or information issues. They know more, or you know more, kind of access to the data. And that's a very powerful way to start doing this too. Like and I just want to say this because I know that sometimes people get, the temperatures rise, people get worked up about something happening. And if you start this kind of conversation with your analysis, your version of what's happening, your point of view, you're not doing anybody any favors, because we have to all agree on what is reality first.
Yes. You nailed it.
Well, this is an important skill because a lot of people get intimidated, right? They're like, oh, I'm, 5 years into my career and I'm supposed to go talk to the CMO of some company. And it's kind of scary. And we don't necessarily know how to do that in a professional and in a thoughtful way. I always say curiosity is one of the most important, if not the most important skill for account managers. It just try to figure out what's going on. What's at the root of everything. Once we see whatever's happening, then we can find the solution to it.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So that was sort of tips and advice for account managers on how to have these difficult conversations. And it's important, especially on this podcast, that we learn how to actually do this, not just the bullet points on it. So let's get back to what else makes a great account manager at an agency in 2025 and beyond. What else are you seeing out there?
I do think helping people make great ideas and helping those ideas be bought and sold. So I call this often the remover of hurdles. So being able to, the three things I talk about are: make it easy for your internal team to make great work, make it easy for your team to sell great work, and make it easy for the clients to buy great work. Because at the end of the day, that is why we're here. That is why money is changing hands. That is why we've been hired, is to make the things that are going to drive the business forward. So I think as an account person, if you can really care deeply about the environment and the conditions where great work happens, and really guard those things, that goes a long way. And to me, that means a lot of things. Honestly, it means, it means knowing what, as I said, being rooted in the business objectives, the strategic objectives, knowing in and out the client's product, how they make money, who the audience is, all of those things. And it also means caring deeply about just the way people are experiencing things. Honestly, the ad industry does have a little bit of a fixation on the work that sometimes can be so strong that people will convince themselves that as long as the work is great, everything else is great. And that's not totally true. I have talked to many people on the client side who say, I'm working with this shop. They could be the hottest creative shop at the moment. And clients will say to me, the work is amazing. The actual experience of making the work is so bad. We don't think we can ever work with them again because we just are feeling sand in the gears, or, it's just not, nobody is there attuned to the experience and taking hurdles down in front of people and having that kind of care for the work and for how people are experiencing the process of making the work.
So what's an example of that?
Of removing a hurdle?
Yeah.
I would say, to me, one that I often talk about that I think a lot of people overlook is when I am reviewing work. Let's say I'm in an internal creative review and I'm viewing work before the client's going to. I will think about, of course, what might need to improve in the work, what might need to get stronger, talking with the team about that, helping them feel really solid that the work that they're going to put in front of the client completely answers on the brief. Like that's the function of an account person, not to make it different, to make sure it is as dialed in to what the client is asking for as possible. And something that I talk about a lot with folks is, okay, this is right on brief. I, as an account person, since I have such a strong relationship with the client and I'm talking to them all the time, I might know that this one client is going to be really nervous about a certain word, a certain idea, a certain concept. And I will tell the team that and be like, we're 100% going to put this in front of them, but so-and-so is going to be a little nervous when they hear this. And so for me, then as an account person, I'm equipping the team to, where in the presentation are we going to put that? Where's this idea going to be best received? Let's be ready to talk through with confidence. Yeah, we can get this done. Maybe it's an idea we're going to send someone into space. Like the client is going to need to know we're good. We've already vetted some of this. Like our producers are ready to go. We know we can pull this off. Things like that go a long way. And then maybe I'll talk to the client and be like, hey, I want you to come into this really open-minded. The team's going to show you some stuff. I know some of the stuff you might see might make you uncomfortable. I'm here. Like I've already told the team that we're trying to address everything that might kind of come up for you. And I'm here. If you want to hop on the phone right after that and just vent some of those worries to me, let's do it. But giving people those kind of, cheat codes and just being, and to me, that's just being really attuned to how people experience things and then sharing that information. I always say as an account person, be sharing the information. You don't have to tell everyone every single thing, but I would never want someone on the team to feel like I have information that I'm purposely keeping from them. So I think a lot of that is just, you are naturally, as an account person, in the position where you're receiving the most information from the most people. So you do just kind of naturally have the most cheat codes to take hurdles down and share those and, use those when you can.
When I think of hurdles within an account, one of the ones that I think is a pain for a lot of people, but specifically for the customer, is the handoff between sales and account. And the way that often manifests is, during the sales process, we get promised the moon and they show up and they ask all these qualification questions and all this stuff. And the sales team will gather so much information about the client. And then if you're lucky, you get like a 15-minute debrief from sales. Otherwise, you just get a couple of notes scrawled on a piece of paper or like 2 bullet points in the CRM, and that's it. And it drives the customers nuts when you walk in and start asking the same questions that the sales team was asking 3 weeks ago. And I consider that to be just totally unprofessional, right? I think that is completely unacceptable. Talk to us about how account managers can overcome that one.
You're so right. It's a huge miss. And it is, as we keep talking about, the thing that clients need to feel solidly is these folks are going to be excellent stewards of my business. These people are going to care about my business as deeply as I do. And so when that is one of their first experiences is I've explained my business to this person, this team, they've now disappeared. I'm now meeting new people who seemingly know very little about my business. That is not
drives them batty. It drives them batty. Yeah.
It's not breeding the confidence that we want. I say, this may be easier done in creative agencies than in some other account management situations, but work the relationship with your sales team, become close with them. Do as much as you can to not have that feel like a handoff. And I think sometimes it's as simple as having a conversation of, hey, this is what is most valuable for me to know as I start to stand things up. So please bring me into conversations like XYZ. I will often, and again, assume the benefit, like give people the benefit of the doubt in that a lot of sales folks, sometimes I've heard over the years, they're saying, well, I don't know if this is going to materialize yet. I don't know. I don't really think this lead is going to close. I don't want to waste your time. I know you're really busy. And so kind of seeing that good intent, thanking them for that, and then also saying, I get that. But if this comes in, I want me and my team to be able to hit the ground running on it. And that looks like us knowing XYZ. What's coming up? What's on your radar? Are you sitting in on anything that I could also sit in on, or that you could press record on and I can watch a Zoom recording of it later if you're not in a position where that you can put new faces in front of them yet. But opening up that dialogue about what your team needs to be most successful in the handoff, I would say if you haven't explicitly had those conversations, that's the place to start.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of those things where everyone can get better at this. It's such a terrible experience for the customer if they're not getting, hand-holding, understanding in the background right away. It looks like we don't have our act together. It's really not a great way to start. Now, I just want to wrap up by coming back to that post of yours of is account management dead? You had an interesting phrase in there called the Tucker inner that got some pretty strong reactions. What did you mean by that? How can we understand what you're talking about there?
Yes. So that one, I was thinking about tucking people in at night, and just that thought of, when someone tucks you in and they tuck all the blankets around you and you just are 10 times cozier than when you put yourself to bed. And I think that there's a lot of what separates good account people from great account people is a feeling, frankly. And it's the feeling of, do all the folks that you're working with feel like you really care about how they're experiencing things and that you're being thoughtful and taking the time to, go out of your way sometimes to do those things for them. I would say it did, there was some chatter in the comments about there are definitely times in creative agencies where people take that too far, or people in different disciplines can be quite demanding of account folks to kind of take care of everything. And so I'm sensitive to that. And I think that was a great point. And I think that the tricky thing here is it's like when you're working with folks who are feeling entitled to certain special treatment, it becomes a lot less fun to tuck people in at night. I think really the ideal is that you are creating an environment where everyone is open and honest about their experiences, what they want and need to do their best work, and that people on the team are picking up on that and extending grace and, giving that to each other when they're able to. And, nobody should ever be running themselves dry, including account people. And so sometimes it can be a tricky one to balance, and it's very dependent on the personalities of the people that you're working with. So, certainly you've got to have those boundaries, and there are things that, you do have to question sometimes. Am I being asked to do this because I'm an account person, or because, are there other factors at play here, and kind of knowing what you're comfortable giving. But I think in general, it's that feeling of, that it's cool to care about people, that you have the ability as a leader, as, kind of the quarterback of the team, to impact how people are experiencing this. And, work is a big part of our lives. We spend a lot of time doing it. And being someone who is looking after that and really wants to make the experience better for people, I think is just a pretty cool thing that you can do.
All right, fantastic. So Jess Manganelli, thank you for being here. I think we've answered the question, is account management dead? No, it is not dead. It is emerging, changing. It's an incredibly important part of your business. So keep at it. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep making your magic out there. Great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Alex.